Hey everyone, and welcome back to Release the Fans, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken fan-based focused podcast, kind of. Well, there we go. That works a little bit better. One day, I'm going to get an intro down for one of these. This is our podcast where we interview Seattle Kraken fans, specifically members of our Patreon. If you would like to be interviewed in this monthly podcast, go check out our Patreon with the link in the description below at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey. Every month, there we go. Every month we randomly select one member of our Terror of the Deep tier, and they get to come on and join us, and we get to learn about how they became a fan of hockey, how they became a fan of the Seattle Kraken, and they get to ask us any questions that they would like. Today we were very lucky to be joined with a very special guest. This is someone who's been around for a long time in the ECH community, following the post-game lives last year, I remember very early on. And then certainly if you're involved in our Discord at all, you absolutely know who this person is. Very, very happy to be joined by our penalty box resident, Alex. How's it going? Glad to have you here.
Doing great, everyone. Thanks for having me, and hello to everyone in the ECH community. This is also the unofficial face reveal for me, given that I haven't really met any of you all before, and yeah, they let me out of this penalty box for one night only. So
Yeah. Yep, just a very, very short amount of time. We're gonna see
Much
how
to
you do
Dylan's
here.
chagrin.
I know. I had to really be talked into this one. I have a nice opening question for you here, and that is: have you had your daily thunderstorm down there in Florida yet?
no, it's unfortunate. It's the time of year where we don't really get the rainstorms, unfortunately. Uh, and something I found out moving from one spot in Florida to another is you get a different type of daily rainstorm depending on where you live.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, living in the Bay Area, you have your daily 3:30 p.m. just like monsoon,
hmm
whereas up in northern Florida it could just be like the entire afternoon where it just doesn't stop raining. Down here, like South Florida, maybe 30 minutes in one day, and then that's about it. Like completely random time of day, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I just remember being in Fort Lauderdale. We're having lunch at a conference, and there's the thunderstorm on the left, and during the hour-long lunch break, it goes from the left right over us and then off to the right. By the time the hour was done, I was just like, all right, Florida. It's all good. I'm dealing with hail and a blizzard warning here in Los Angeles, so weather is
Oh,
weather.
well,
Yep.
hope all is safe there, and not too
But
many complications from bad weather or anything like that.
yeah, it's just a traffic nightmare, but appreciate it. And RJ, you've just got Seattle weather, and it's Seattle weather.
Yeah, I mean, sunny and cold today, but snow coming tonight, so that should be pretty fun.
There we go. Surprise, everybody. This is just a weather podcast now.
What is the snow you speak of?
I know, right? They're warning us about it, but I doubt we'll see it outside the hail. Afra was very happy though. All right, so we'll actually dig into the hockey now. I promise. Let's start off, at the beginning for you, Alex, which is basically how did you become a hockey fan? What was that kind of first experience for you?
Yeah, so for me, it was a little bit of a roundabout kind of way. Growing up, in Florida, obviously we had the team since before I was born, but really, it took a long time for that sort of team to get integrated into the community and really build up a fan base. Like it wasn't really in the forefront of a lot of people's minds, even through the late '90s and early 2000s. There's a lot of reasons for that, namely, not having much of a grassroots hockey experience in the area. Like junior teams are not a thing in Florida, like they are with the WHL and Northwestern US and stuff like that. Some questionable ownership, including at one point ownership that had potential Japanese yakuza ties, which is certainly interesting. And just the fact that growing up, like a lot of my friends and parents weren't really huge hockey fans or anything like that. So even when we had like the cup run in like '04 and stuff like that, it didn't really quite click with me. Um, Even though for some reason I had NHL '03 growing up and stuff like that. I have no idea how
Oh
that
yeah,
happened, but
great
that's
game.
still a classic. Um,
For sure.
but really for me, where it started to kind of click and it started to become more of like a routine occurrence. It's like, okay, like I'm gonna watch the game today and stuff like that. Actually started with a completely different sport. So it was 2008, and the Rays were, for the first time in really their entire existence, were not like abjectly terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So I happened to tune into one game in June of that year, and they were playing the Boston Red Sox in Fenway Park, and it just happened to be during that one game there was a pitch that was thrown inside and hit the player on Boston, who was Coco Crisp. So he charged the mound and just starts swinging at James Shields, the other pitcher. Both benches clear. It becomes just a total like dust up with like both benches clear. I was like, wow, this is interesting. Does this happen every game?
Yeah.
Me not knowing baseball at all. So I have followed them all throughout that season. It kind of ended up flowing over into be like, oh, well, baseball season's over. What do I watch now? And started to kind of pick up the hockey fandom from there. And from there, you get into some lean years for the local team, but eventually, you get Stamkos Hedman. Stamkos starts scoring a bunch of goals, and before you know it, you're watching every single game. That's kind of how it ended up happening over time.
So what was that adjustment like from, baseball to then starting to get into hockey, and kind of what'd you think of this different sport that, it's got a lot of differences from what you were seeing with baseball? I guess, the fights, I guess, maybe continued over from that one game, but overall pretty different sport.
Yeah. I mean, I'd had like some experiences with like hockey, like live and stuff like that, as like a younger kid. Like I went to a couple games in like the playoff run that they had in 04, I think it was. But just thinking back, historically on like what the league was like at that time, it was still a very defensive-oriented league, at least comparison to how it is today. And fighting was still very much a part of the game. Like I think the Lightning had one particular individual, stereotypical, enforcer makeup, broken nose in his, headshot photo. Gets into at least one fight a game. I believe his name was Zenon Konopka, in case that name hasn't ring any bells with anyone. But it was back in the day where like teams were legitimately rough and tumble, and the game really hadn't started to move away from that into more of a skill game than it is today. So I guess it still was kind of what everyone typically thinks of as like old time hockey, still a little bit. So from that perspective and having a little bit of exposure growing up, it was kind of what I had expected it would be. And then, over time, obviously you can observe that it, moves away from that as, those older players, leave the league and get replaced by younger guys that are, maybe a little bit less physically inclined when it comes to playing the game. But yeah.
Yeah, the kind of age old and the NHL still trying to kind of get around to marketing the league maybe a little differently from that perception everybody still has about it. So obviously starting off, your hockey fandom with the Tampa Bay Lightning's local team, it's a cup winning team, all that kind of stuff. I mean, tell us about being a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, and then also how your fandom might have changed and evolved now, as I see you're wearing a Seattle Kraken jersey once that new team, enters the league, last year.
Yeah, definitely. I figured that the Kraken jersey was apropos given the the ECH community and such. I think you kind of, starting watching their games in like 09. I mean, you're starting from the ground up in terms of building that franchise out. Still have the old ownership at the time. We're just laying the foundational pieces for like today's team with Stamkos and Hedman joining, and then eventually Jeff Vinik buys the team following that 2011 Eastern Conference final run, if I recall correctly, which that series was a whole topic unto itself. But
was that the Dwayne Rollison year?
That was also the Game 7 with the 2011 Boston Bruins, where somehow neither team committed a penalty the entire game, which certainly is interesting.
Very believable. Very believable.
But yeah, so over time, like they start to build the core out and kind of get locked onto that trajectory, and through some trials and tribulations, which I think are well documented, culminating in a 4-game sweep one year. They kind of figured it out, and there was definitely a transformation during that time from a very skilled, like less physical team into more of a rough and tumble team that's not afraid to, for lack of a better term, get sent to the box and try to take a couple guys with them. For I think to a certain extent the team viewed that transformation as necessary in order to succeed. Um, and I guess when it came to making that transition, adding in the Kraken as another team, it kind of really opens up the kind of the whole realm of possibilities. It's a team that doesn't have any players to start with, which
Mhm.
is not something that really almost any fan base has gotten to experience within the past 20 plus years, except for Vegas fans, obviously. But it really like gives you a chance to be like, okay, like I can see the whole journey, like not even just like new players, but like new management, like brand new owner, new fan bases that are starting from the same point that you are. So for me, it was a really unique experience, and I'm glad that kind of when it came to picking that second team, I kind of made the decision ahead of time. Like, okay, I'm going to follow this Seattle team, for better or for worse, no matter what happens, in terms of their success within the first couple of years, like they'll eventually succeed, and teams that are currently successful will fall off, and it'll be a good thing to kind of have something to look forward to even during those other lean years.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you kind of again balanced that with Kraken versus Lightning? I know they're in opposite conferences,
Yeah.
but easy for me with the Sharks being as irrelevant as they are. I don't even have to think about them. But with Tampa being as good as they are, the Kraken being looking like a playoff team this year, I don't know how do you balance that out?
I mean, I think that it kind of almost balances itself out to a certain extent in that the longer team's successful, like the less and less the regular season really becomes the focal point for
Mhm.
that team, in the sense that individual games, it's nice to win them, but really in the long run, as long as you're on track to make the playoffs, it kind of matters individually a little bit less. Whereas with the Kraken, there's more of a sense of immediacy where it's like, okay, like this, Tuesday afternoon in the game against Anaheim, that matters. Like this is the first time the team's trying to make the playoffs. Like there's a reason to care about this specific game.
Afro appearance.
I know, sorry. Afro butting in here.
The real star of the show appears.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's growing up, I tried to do the whole like East West thing, like have an Eastern Conference team, have a Western Conference team, because you do kind of get different perspectives. As you were talking about earlier, you can kind of have, maybe they're in different spots along their journey, and you can kind of follow that idea and kind of go through the best of both worlds, whether it's one team rebuilding and the other is competitive and in their window, and you get to experience both of those things. And yeah, I don't see anything wrong with doing it that way. I think it can be really exciting, and it can really enrich your your overall passion for the sport and for the league and all the players and what it takes to win in this one in this league. Well, we'll go with another question here about the Lightning and their fans, and then we'll get back to Seattle here. And that's, what's the most common misconception about the Lightning and their fans? Is it that you all own a boat and you all just go parade together in all of your boats after every cup win? What is it?
I wish that were the case. It is not. I don't know if I necessarily say that there's a misconception necessarily about the team or its fans, but more of there. I feel like there's a lot of blame cast in the direction of the team, just from not anyone in particular, but like general Twitter people
Mm-hmm.
about like the team being dirty, or like them circumventing the salary cap and things like that.
There it is.
I think
Because you did.
But I think to a certain extent, even to the extent that one would deem that accurate, that's
Mhm.
something that the league pushed them into doing, like in the sense of adapting their style of play. Playing the skill game was not working in the playoffs. I think pretty much anyone would agree with that. They got pushed around by the Capitals
Yeah.
in that Eastern Conference final. They got out physical by Columbus during that one series. So, I think forget who it was specifically. It might have been John Tortorella even that said, like, okay, we shouldn't be kind of, in the long term, unleashed a monster by sweeping them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I don't want to say that that's accurate necessarily, but like it certainly was an impetus to for them to change the way they played and kind of revisit who they were as a team.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, every team is going to have to muck it up at least a little bit in order to have success in the playoffs. Like, there's no team that's going to be completely unblemished in terms of questionable hits or or plays like that throughout a 4 series playoff run. It just does not happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the league does, it rewards certain things, and teams that can muck it up like that tend to do better, especially in the playoffs.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to the Kraken here, we've talked some Lightning. Now on to Seattle.
Yep.
Now, what is your favorite part of being a Kraken fan? I know you mentioned you're just decided I'm gonna follow this team for better or worse, and I'm gonna follow them through the start of this journey, all the way. I mean, what's your favorite has been your favorite part of that so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just that there's a wholehearted just excitement about like like a new team and stuff like that, and then also just like organic growth not only within the fan base, but like you see like all these people from like XYZ state that are out of market fans and stuff like that, and it really feels like it's a growing team, and it's a fan base that's really taken off. So that's been exciting to see, and then of course you have a reason to get excited about young prospects and stuff like that, and generally quicker turnaround times between someone being drafted and them making their way into the lineup than on a team that's in contending status where they're picking lower in the draft. And you can be like, okay, like Shane Wright was just standing on that stage just this past year, and a couple months later he's already in the NHL, making his first couple games and scoring his first goal, which great goal by the way.
Definitely.
First of many.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely not only just the new team kind of vibes, but also to the extent when you're picking up a team as your second team, you kind of, or at least I found that I was able to kind of be a little bit more high level view, and be a little bit less like, okay, like this is my favorite player, like they have to stay forever kind of thing from my end. Whereas I don't know, I feel like I'd have a harder time doing that with a team that I've supported since I was a kid. There's definitely a different type of emotional investment. Not that there isn't an emotional investment, it's just not quite the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally know what you're talking about. Like I said, I did the whole like kind of two teams thing growing up with the Penguins and with the Ducks, and to some extent with the Sharks growing up there and being in their like youth program and everything. And there is one of those where you go through that, and because the teams, like I talked about earlier, could be in different places of development, then you have different emotions attached to it. It's different with like a team like the Kraken, like you said, somebody like the Shane Wright or Matty Beniers, and you're developing that emotional attachment to them as a young player and watching the beginnings of their career, versus if you're hopping on, say like not necessarily with yourself, but like if a Lightning fan had hopped on in 2015, seeing like, oh, okay, like here's already Stamkos kind of at his peak, and here's this Vasilevsky guy, and he's fantastic and one of the best goaltenders around, and all that kind of stuff, and you get a very different perspective on it. And it's an interesting one for anybody who has to kind of go through that. I want to know, do you have a favorite Kraken player? I mean, I see some numbers there maybe on that jersey. That may be a hint.
Yeah, this is a Yanni Gourde jersey,
of course.
But to the extent of giving a more exciting, less obvious answer, I'd say my favorite players in terms of all prior attachments aside would probably be Jared McCann. I don't know.
Okay.
I just really like the way he approaches the game. He's one of the few guys on the Kraken that really isn't afraid to sling the puck at the net, like which. Mm-hmm. In terms of long-term needs, like I would not mind if they pick up a high volume shooter, maybe a left wing.
Yeah,
just saying. But yeah, I don't know. He's really taken off since he's come here too, which is always nice. It's always easy to root for players that have major breakthroughs in their careers and really take it to the next level and secure those long-term contracts. And especially when you have a player that's signed to term, it's a little bit easier to be like, okay, like obviously they made a commitment to this player, like unless there's a pressing need, they're not going to look to trade him or things like that. So those are times where it's easier to be like, okay, like I can actually feel invested in this player, like really care about their success and hope that they drive the team forward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's so important for any like new team, a new franchise to have that, so that fans can feel like safe in liking somebody that's also already established and maybe not a prospect. Like that is an important thing, and I do feel like McCann has done that for a lot of people. Like it was a great job.
And he was the first one to really
for them to
re-up once the team had started.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Got the Yanni Gourde jersey there, so I do have to ask, how was it difficult when he left and when the Kraken grabbed him? Like was that like a bittersweet thing? Had you already decided you were rolling with the Kraken at that point?
Oh yeah. I had decided I was going to be a Kraken fan like the moment the team was announced, basically, because I briefly thought about it when Vegas entered the league, and I don't know what it was, but for whatever reason, it was the vibes were not there for me personally.
Because you're a smart, cool person. That's what it was.
History looking back on it was a wise decision to not hop on that boat for many reasons. Which I'm sure our smart listeners can fill in for themselves.
Yes.
But yeah, it was tough to see him go, but at the same time, it was like, okay, well, it's I'll still be seeing him play like every other day basically, and it'll be a new opportunity for him to excel and in some cases a bigger role, but in more of a role where he can actually have a leadership voice on the team, which, looking at the team he's leaving, like there's just a lot of voices in that locker room, and a third line player is only gonna have so much of a voice, especially a guy that's worked himself up from the ECHL and never really had that draft pedigree and stuff like that. But obviously very happy for him and the role he's found in Seattle. That definitely made it easier of a transition, supporting the Kraken, and that there was the one player. It's like, okay, well, there's Yanni Gourde. Like, how could one, not root for this team with Yanni Gourde on it?
Seeing his face,
good pick.
Smile. Yeah, yeah. No, it's like an instant one there. We always ask about the jerseys. You got the Yanni Gourde jersey on there. Any other Kraken jerseys? You want to talk about Lightning jerseys you have? Just any obscure players maybe?
Yeah, so I have a few other jerseys that are not this one. This is the only Kraken jersey I own at the moment. I did not end up buying one of the reverse retros, but if they come up with a third at some point, I'll probably look at that. Probably end up being a Maddie for being honest.
Yeah.
Got to think about the long-term, usability of that jersey. Other than Lightning jerseys, of which I have quite a few of, the reverse retros were definitely purchased in high volume. I think probably my favorite of those, because it's just very random, is the Arizona Coyotes 2020 reverse retro. I got a Phil Kessel jersey. Yeah. It's purple. It's got screen printing, and it's a Phil Kessel jersey.
Yes.
I don't know.
How can you have a problem with that, Dylan?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I thought Alex was going with this year's Arizona ones, where we were very much on different sides of things. Yeah. There, RJ. Yeah. But yes, 2020, fabulous. Phil Kessel, perfect.
Yes. Yeah. And the other one that I've seen that people are pretty divided on is the Washington Capitals reverse retros. I think it was like a blue versus a red screaming eagle. Yeah. I personally prefer the 2021, which is the one that I bought. Definitely the reverse retros were I looked at them, and if there was a relatively affordable one, definitely bought one. If it was,
is there a player on the Caps one?
Yeah, it's an Ovechkin jersey from.
I mean, you have to.
Yeah.
And because I bought that, I had to buy a Crosby with a Robo Penguin just to match it.
Let's go.
The universe.
Yeah,
let's go.
They're hanging together in the closet right now. So.
Nice.
Well, that's
no Zdeno Konopka jersey.
No, it was I don't know. The funds were not quite there in 2009 for whatever reason.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
What's the most obscure? Last question on the jersey. What's the most obscure jersey that you have?
Obscure.
I mean, it's not an Arizona Coyotes.
That might be it. That very well might be it.
I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily obscure, other than the Kessel jersey is probably the winner, honestly, but this is more humorous than anything. So I bought a Stadium Series Ryan McDonough jersey this past year, and about 6 months later he got traded. So a bit of an unfortunate choice on my end, but it's a nice jersey, so I guess
You'll always have
be
that
able
Stadium
to
Series
chuckle
game.
about that. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And he got traded to the team they played. That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
In the Stadium Series.
They got a nice good look at him in that game, and they were like, "Hey, you know what? This is somebody that
He
can help
looks
us
pretty
out."
good in that jersey.
Yes, we want that.
Let's make him wear ours.
I was gonna say, I always will have a special spot in my heart for the Stadium Series jerseys. And RJ, you should know why, because I was wearing the Stadium Series Crosby jersey when we watched the Penguins win that Stanley Cup in 2016, the SAP Center in San Jose, and everybody, you always gave me grief about the Stadium Series jerseys before that, RJ. Not sure. In the 7 years after, I've heard much of that.
Dylan's managed to cause 2/3 of this call pain with one sentence.
Yeah, I know.
He's good at that.
It's a special talent of mine for sure.
Jonathan Drouin was onside. No, that particular year, the Penguins were, at least in my opinion, far and away the best team. Probably still the best forechecking team I've seen, probably ever. I mean, most teams they played could not clear the puck out of their own end for large stretches of the game.
That was basically that game you and I watched, RJ.
I know. I'm well aware. I'm reliving the whole thing in my head right now. I've never seen a team forecheck and backcheck like that team did. That Penguins team, complete buy-in from everybody. Yeah, they were really good.
Yep, because of Phil Kessel. Let's just turn this into a Phil Kessel discussion. Should we go back to the Toronto days now, everybody?
He was robbed of that Conn Smythe, I think.
Yes,
I will. Yes,
we're all can agree on that.
Yes,
Dylan was there in the building, and I was complaining about Crosby getting it, and he had to agree.
Yeah, I totally agreed. The league, they wanted Crosby to have a Conn Smythe for the trophy case. Little did they know he was going to deservedly win it the next season. But yes, Phil Kessel deserved that one. And gosh, history would have been so cool if Phil Kessel had a Conn Smythe trophy. Think of how great his Arizona pad with the one armchair and the glitter poster, movie poster on the wall would have been if there was also just a Conn Smythe in there. Would have been fantastic. Oh man. It's good stuff.
All right. So I think I know you had some questions prepared, like trivia questions prepared. Do we want to do that, or do we want to go to the open discussion section?
Well, yeah, I didn't know like how deep your history went with the Bolts, Alex. So I was gonna sprinkle things in and then throughout these trivia questions, but some of them would be kind of before your time with the Bolts. How much do you know about the Lightning's history?
I mean, a little bit.
Okay.
A fair bit. If it was anything between
right.
around the first Cup era, I know a little bit.
Yeah, because there was just some in here that I knew would even give RJ a hard time and stuff, and I just thought they were interesting, such as there's some easier ones, but I thought this one was really interesting because I had no idea, and it's who was the first Lightning player with 3 hat tricks in a single season.
3 hat tricks in one season. That's tough. I know their first game against the Chicago Blackhawks as a franchise, they had a 4-goal game from Chris Kontos, but I don't think he had two more hat tricks in that season. I'd say Brian Bradley, maybe. That's my guess.
RJ, do you want to take a?
I mean,
wild
Stamkos
shot
feels like the obvious answer, but it's too obvious, I would think. So I mean, let's go. I don't know, Dave Andreychuk. Maybe he had a bunch of power play goals altogether. I don't know.
It was in the 1998-1999 season, and it was Wendell Clark.
What? Okay.
Right? That's what I was like. Okay, this trivia thing is obscure. I will say this: it's on a website called Useful Trivia, and up on the top right, the biggest thing on this website is a free tarot card reading button offered by the same website as offering this trivia quiz. So
I think we could all plan on being wrong together on a lot of these.
Yeah, I was gonna
Which is
say
fine by me.
we don't have to like keep going, but I thought that question in particular was like an interesting one of all of these things. It was which players scored 42 goals in the Bolts' first season? Does anybody know? It gives me A, B, C, and D answers. I can offer you that. Adam Creighton, Chris Kontos, John Tucker, and Brian Bradley.
I think it was Brian Bradley. I think Chris Kontos really
He peaked in game one.
he had one game, and I think he ended up with like somewhere in like the mid-20s or something like that. But yeah, Brian Bradley was one of the first, like, I think it was the Tampa Bay Lightning's first All-Star, if I recall correctly, as well. The Jordan Eberle, if you will.
Yeah, that's exactly what it says here. All that stuff about him. So yeah, absolutely perfect. Brian Bradley. There we go.
Yeah.
Knows the Lightning better than you,
stuff.
RJ. Congrats.
Oh yeah, easily.
I know. This one was I think fun too. Was just who's the first jersey retired by the Lightning?
Okay, so they have two jersey retirements, Marty and Vinny. Pretty sure Marty retired first, so I think it was Marty. I remember some of the fan base was a little bit, still a little bit upset with Marty at that time. But I think those feelings have long since softened, just given the circumstances of the initial exit from the team.
Yeah,
it's not the greatest.
Yeah, no, and that is right. It is Martin St. Louis. Number 26 jersey was the first one retired there. So that was basically it. That was my fun Tampa Bay Lightning trivia. The other one's pretty easy. We already talked about him. John Tortorella was the coach to lead them to their first Stanley Cup over the Flames. So that's what I had there, RJ. Unless you've got some obscure one from your memory banks.
No, I mean, let's see. What question has the answer of Pavel Kubina? I don't know.
The most random Tampa Bay player you can remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mikhail Renberg is the most random Tampa Bay player I can remember. They just got him for 1 year, named him captain. You did all right, left the next season.
Yes.
That was it.
Yep. gotta love it. Kind of similar situation to Seattle. Mark Giordano. Bring you in, name you captain, see ya at the deadline. Have a good one. I was just gonna say, like, we talked about jersey retirements there. Do you have an idea in your mind of who you would like ideally be the first jersey retired for the Seattle Kraken, Alex?
Well, I assume we're excluding the 32 that they retired.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, far too early to really speculate on that. I think probably the leading contender, if you just ask, someone on the street, you have to retire someone's number someday, like that's on the team right now, would probably be Matty. But I mean, you just can't really predict how it's going to go, that far out, given that in order to really merit a jersey retirement, you need to be a peak performer for, a decade plus. And there's just really no way to say that that's going to happen with certainty with really any player, just given all it takes, is one bad, play or injury, and careers could be altered. So, knock on wood, that doesn't happen to anybody on the team, but it's just really hard to project that far out. And for all we know, there could be an upcoming superstar that the Kraken have already drafted that blows past everyone on the roster in terms of production. But,
Jagger Firkus.
Yes.
There you go.
Let's go. Red hair. They're gonna retire a red jersey for Jagger Firkus. I'm calling it now on the record. Everybody, write it down. I think Matty is definitely kind of like the like safe pick and everything. First player drafted in franchise history, all that stuff. But hey, if McCann keeps playing like this, keeps leading the team in goal scoring for every year that they exist for like the first 8 years, I could see a Jared McCann jersey hanging from the rafters. With one of the numbers he wore.
Yeah, I know, 16 or 19.
Maybe he'll keep changing it every year. He'll just start like creeping upwards with it.
They're raising the jersey. It just has 2 question marks on it.
It's like a fraction. It's like 16 over 19.
19, yeah.
I mean, another name that is hard to project, of course, like I mentioned, but if he ends up being a long-term piece for the Kraken, you could even talk about Vince Dunn being one of those people as well. If he ends up playing for the team, hypothetically to 2034 or something like that. Like that's, one of those cases where if that's the backbone of your defense and you win a championship during that time, you could definitely think about that, which I'm sure we'd all love to think about that. Potential championships at some point.
Just don't think about it too hard before he signs an extension.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the big factor there.
There we go. Oh. Got you back.
Yeah, I think we might have had a freeze there for a second.
Yeah, we did. We did.
It's all right. I'll edit them out later.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. So then you want to ask the final question there, RJ? All right.
Yeah. All right. So we're on to the final segment here of Release the Fans, and I always enjoy this one because it kind of flips the script here. You get to ask us anything you want. We get to talk about anything you want to do. So, I mean, have you thought about this, Alex? Like, what would you like to talk about here? Ball's in your court.
Okay. I guess for you all, starting up, an independent media company and things like that, I'm sure you've seen, trends in coverage across various markets where, some of these larger media companies are pulling out of certain markets. I guess from y'all's perspective, do you feel that creates an increased opportunity for independent media outlets such as yourselves?
Oh, I know Dylan's got opinions on this.
I was definitely going to say, it's like, all right, how much time do I have here? Yeah, I do. I think it's one of those that anytime there's just less voices in a room or less voices in a space, it means that you have the opportunity to have yours be heard, or it's that much more hearable, listenable to. I'm in media, it's okay. But yeah, it is one of those things where, obviously we were very fortunate coming into like an expansion space where there just wasn't anything, that it was easy to kind of jump on board and try to establish a voice, try to get in some listeners, months before the team had a roster and all of that kind of stuff. But I do think that in other fan bases, as we see things, as there's issues with RSNs and, the papers of record disappear in places just because of how the media landscape has shifted, I still think that there is room for independent people to come in and kind of fill in some of those gaps or pick up the modes that people get news and entertainment these days that have changed. And there's still a lot of that isn't really covered in most fan bases, right? I could totally see, there should be way more hockey TikTokers. And I don't mean just highlight reel, whatever stuff, but like TikTok journalism. I mean, that exists in other spaces, but you don't really see it in hockey media yet. And I think that that's the kind of stuff that there's definitely opportunities for that if people want to get creative with it and kind of figure it out, to be those pioneers in that space, kind of similar to what we've been doing on YouTube, where it was just kind of like, let's just brainstorm. Like, we like YouTube as a method of getting things out. We like video over, say, a written piece, or just like it being another blog. How can we differentiate ourselves? That works. What do people like to do? They like to watch hockey together. They like to talk about it. Let's do live streams. Let's get people involved in chat there. Right? As long as you're creative, I think, because the big media companies that are left are really not being creative. They're just kind of slowly dying. I think there's definite avenues for people out there. RJ, you can give your side of things.
No, I mean, I think that's really well said. There are opportunities there because a lot of the big media companies, they haven't really changed with the times, in the way that you need to. If you want to keep getting eyeballs on your stuff, you want to keep getting people's attention. And I mean, the key really is just that there's no barriers to entry anymore. Mm-hmm. With social media, with platforms like YouTube, TikTok especially, that's one we're still trying to kind of figure out. But there's so many chances for you, as long as you have a smartphone. If you just have one of these, which pretty much we all do, you can create high quality content now, and it can get seen. If it's good, if you're a good storyteller, you can get your stuff seen by millions of people with almost zero investment. So there's a lot of opportunity for people there, and still a lot of room for growth, I think, in that space. Just for people who can kind of understand that and get creative with it too. Like, trying things that, a lot of the traditional media just aren't going to try, because it's too much of a risk. It, deviates from what they're doing. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I'm excited to see where it goes to, and to kind of be on that ride. It's really fun.
Yeah, I fully expect people to come up with stuff past us at some point too.
Oh yeah.
It's the natural evolution. But that's a really good question, and I do think that it's one that people in like all sorts of fan bases should be asking themselves if they're interested in it, or even if they're already a player in that space. The idea of, okay, well, maybe I don't just start a blog, maybe I try to start something else instead. That's a good question. I like that one, Alex.
Yeah. All right, anything else?
Yeah, I guess what are y'all's respective favorite aspects of covering the Kraken? When you think about the life cycle of the season, you start with your draft before the season, go through the training camps, preseason games, and then you move into the off season. What are y'all's like favorite portions in terms of from the media side of things covering those events?
All right, RJ, talk about the press box meals.
That one's too easy, so I've talked about that plenty. I'll put that to the side for now. But as far as like favorite times of the year, again, I'm a kind of armchair GM type of guy. I love the roster moves. I love all of that type of thinking. So right around now, around the trade deadline, is this really fun time, because you have all that speculation, you have all that playing around with rosters, especially last year got to cover a team that was an obvious seller. This year getting to cover a team that's a buyer, I think, potentially. I mean, they've already bought. So it's interesting to see both sides of that and how it feels different. I really enjoyed a lot of the off-season stuff too, even though, it wasn't with the team around. But remembering the first day of free agency, and with rookie camp and all of that going on, that was some of the most exciting times that I've covered the Kraken, because it just felt like everything was going on at once. And when you're around other members of the media too, that's one of the cool parts of being there. You're around a lot of really smart hockey minds, and you get to kind of hear everyone's take and everyone react to news as it breaks. To have a lot of really smart people in the room and kind of bounce your ideas off everyone. It's really cool as someone who just kind of grew up a hockey fan, thinking about these things and talking with my friends about trades and whatnot, to be in this position where you kind of digest all that with really smart people, and then get to go talk to the GM who maybe just made the trade or signing. It's the dream come true.
Yeah, that was I think the most fun I'd had really our entire time covering the Kraken was that day of free agency. And it was, we're there and we're watching Shane Wright, and it's like his first time out there with the Kraken, and Matty Beniers is there, and it's all the rookies, Riker Evans, Jagger Firkus, Ty Nelson, all this stuff's going on. And then it's like, okay, free agency just like opened up, and Burakovsky was signed, and Justin Schultz is signed, and Martin Jones is signed. And then it's like, okay, we go in and we talk to Shane Wright, and then we wait like 4 hours for Ron Francis to be available, and we talked to Ron Francis. But you
got the media food in the meantime, so it's fine.
Did get the media food in the meantime. I knew he'd bring that up. But that was a really cool experience. Obviously, I don't get to be around for as much, just not being up there in Seattle. So for me, and this would probably be the case even if I was around up there in Seattle, it's always been the community aspect of it for me, as far as covering the team, being able to whether it's just hang out and watch games with people, like we do the live game commentaries, or talking about them afterwards. Like that's just always been part of sports for me, and I know for many other people. And so being able to have a community where we can talk and hang out about that stuff, the fact that we've got the Discord with people such as yourself, and the moment that news breaks, we're all in there and we're talking about it and giving our own opinions, and people bring up, just different ideas as far as what the team could be doing. And then it's fun to kind of brainstorm on that and go down those different rabbit holes. All of that has been, this incredible thing that I didn't really know was going to happen. We obviously knew that had to happen if we were ever going to be successful or get off the ground, but I didn't anticipate just how awesome it was going to be, and what a special place it was going to be, and how much it was going to mean to me either. And so for me, the coolest part about the whole media journey is being able to connect with the larger community of Kraken fans, and kind of be in that spot where, you know, people can be like, hey, can you ask about this? And then like we can go and ask about that, and we can kind of share all that experience with everybody. I think that's been a lot of fun. All right. What else you got for us, Alex?
So I know we talked about, you know, kind of the how hard it can be to, you know, when you're moving onto, you know, watching or you know, even covering a new team,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it can be difficult to kind of, you know, push those, you know, emotional attachments to the back burner. Did you all have any difficulty kind of putting your past fandoms behind you? I know I would have a very difficult time. That's why I'm asking. Or you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, well,
were there certain factors that helped? Maybe.
I think in my case, certainly there were some certain factors that helped. I think the timing was actually perfect, where the Sharks, I mean, I'm sure you kind of know their general trajectory over the last few years, and yeah, they got to a point where, you know, all the success, all the competitiveness, all the winning finally caught up to them, and now they're, you know, they've been in denial about a rebuild for several years now, and you know they're kind of irrelevant as an organization now.
And
So
still are.
yeah, and still are. Yes, they're still very much in denial about that rebuild. So, you know, as far as, because you know they're in the same division as the Kraken, so they face off a lot. But it helps certainly that even if I've actually, you know, the Sharks fan stuff has actually gone away a lot more than I thought it would. But even if it hadn't, it helps that whatever those two teams face off against each other, the Sharks and Kraken, every single time I've always felt like it was in both teams' best interest for the Kraken to win. So that kind of helps. There's no conflict of interest there or anything. But I will say, like, going and covering a road, you know, my first road game in San Jose last week, you know, it did bring back a lot of great memories of being in that building and growing up even as a kid watching games there. And I definitely, you know, it felt more special than I expected it to be. And you know, there definitely, you could feel like there was still some kind of, you know, there was still some emotional attachment there, just to,
Mhm.
again, just to being in that spot, and you know, being at SAP Center, and being, you know, there for a Sharks game. You know, there's always some little bit of me that'll kind of remain whenever I'm there.
Yeah, it's for me it was, I guess the Penguins being my number one team, it was a little easy just because it was East Coast team, Eastern Conference, don't have to deal with the direct head to head. It's not a divisional opponent, but I mean, there's still stuff like, you know, anybody who's listened to us for any length of time knows that I talk glowingly about the Ducks and all the community outreach that they do, and all of those things. So there's obviously a soft spot for me there. I think it had helped though that even before the Kraken existed, and even before I hopped on board with you, RJ, and we went to do this, I had started taking like a larger approach of like just trying to be a hockey fan in general, and just wanting the sport to be successful, just wanting the league to be successful, wanting individual players to be successful. And so I was already kind of transitioning out of just like really being a diehard for one specific team into kind of appreciating everybody. But the one thing that I think doesn't really get talked about by media people enough is that when you're covering one team specifically, and you're in the building every day and you're around them, and those are the players you're talking to every day, and you're around their locker room and you're seeing how they interact with each other and how they do things, and you're covering, those are the games that you're going to in person, and you're hearing the crowds get excited around you when that team does something, and you're following them. And it's not even like, there's the aspects of like your livelihood then technically revolves around how successful that team could be, so you have like this financial interest in them being successful. It's just the fact that, like, for us, like I talked about before, being involved with the community, like all of that just made it so much easier, because it's like, look, I'm engaging with Kraken fans. It's that much easier to be a Kraken fan yourself. I'm covering and listening to every word that comes out of this organization. It's that much easier to be a Kraken fan, because that's what I'm experiencing. The Kraken were the first team I'd ever watched all 82 games of from a season. I'd never done that before with any other team. And so to do that, having this job covering the Kraken, going through that again this second season, like I just never digested that much information and that much content from one specific organization before. And so to do that made it really, really easy to just be like, no, I'm just a Kraken fan now. Like that is where I'm at. As far as other things, like not being a fanboy, I guess maybe because I'm not around all the time, but like I'm a pretty big Adam Larson fanboy. No matter what, I don't bother with worrying about any sort of bias there. I'm gonna like Adam Larson. I'm gonna go with that. But there is an aspect to like it. I've never felt the urge to like stand up and clap in a press box when they do something good. Like I get excited inside, but I think you're so like dialed into the job of like, oh, I got to tweet like what just happened, or I've got to work on what just happened, or let me break down that play on video, that you don't like have the opportunity to get excited about it, which is a little weird, and it's not something that I can probably accurately describe unless someone else has already been through that themselves.
Right. And I mean, because that's the thing, I know exactly what you're talking about because it's something I've experienced. But it's like when something big happens, your first instinct is, oh man, I've got to go, tweet about that or cover that. Beyond just, yeah, it's all about like what the story is versus as like a fan. Because I think, now there's, again, we're media where I've got to be, especially like being there every day and everything. There's a certain level of professionalism. You don't ever, cheer in the press box or anything like that. But yeah, it's just, there's a certain, I don't know, like freedom you have as an actual fan that I remember, going to Sharks games where they did something good, even at home, just standing up and yelling, yeah, that I've never really experienced that with the Kraken as much as I still see how much work the players put in every day. You get to know them. They're good people. Like you want to see them succeed and you want to see the fans happy and our great community you interact with. But it is just a different first instinct of like what you do when success happens. Yeah. And it's, the times where I've really felt like, wow, this team is really special and this is such a cool thing that I'm doing. And, I like the success they're having. It comes like after the game when I'm usually as I'm like lying in bed trying to fall asleep, but I can't because I keep processing everything from the game and that night, like that's when it happens, not like versus as a fan, like right at the game as the moment takes place. Yeah. If that makes any sense. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure, but a really good question.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Any more questions?
I think those are the main ones that were on my mind. Unless you all want to talk about something in particular else, that was all I had.
No, I mean, now that we're talking about Adam Larson, I guess I should just keep going about him. But...
okay. No. Let's not get Dylan started there.
All right.
Let's say how many attempts to rename the deep dive to the deep V did you have to rebuff, RJ?
more than I cared to, but yeah, sorry, Dylan. I know. Not changing the name.
I know. I just set up like a bot to send an email once a day about it. It just keeps going.
Send a response email that just says no once a day.
So. Yeah. Go. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this one. I think you bringing that perspective of being somebody who is a fan of two different teams, not just having the Kraken. It's something that I think a lot of hockey fans out there, a lot of sports fans can understand and relate to. And it's not something that we've heard on this podcast yet. And so I'm always happy to hear all the different ways that people are fans and because there's just 1,000, you know what I mean? Like everybody's unique. Everybody's got a unique sense of being a fan. And that's why I'm so happy that we're doing this podcast, is that we get to hear all those different stories from people such as yourself, Alex. And it's just been a lot of fun to talk to you, get the face reveal, all that good stuff in here. And gonna remind everybody that we do this once a month, and if you're interested in being involved, sharing how you are a Seattle Kraken fan, how you became a hockey fan, wanting to talk about the Kraken, want to ask RJ and I any questions that you've had about the job that we do, about the Seattle Kraken, or about hockey, life, whatever it is, you too can be a part of these Release the Fans podcast episodes by joining the Patreon, the Terror of the Deep tier over on our Patreon, link in the description below, but it's patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey. Alex, one more time, thank you so much for being here and doing this with us, but also thank you for all the support that you've given us over the years now. I can say years. It's been years, RJ. Over the years now, whether it's in those post-game live chats, it's on the Patreon, like I said, especially in the Discord where you're very active and a big part of the community over there. I just want to say thank you for joining us, and thanks for everything that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the the great coverage and the great conversation.
Yeah, for sure. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this episode of Release the Fans. Hope you liked it, and we will see you all next time.